Okay, I'm cooking up my goulash from yesterday, my leftover goulash. And I've got some snow in here to boil for dishwater. Save on my water. I got all kinds of free water around here, as you can see. It's just in the wrong form to wash dishes with, that's all. Anyway, it's quite windy out here right now. But I'll tell you the story anyway. I've talked a little bit about my friend from high school who I told you a story at the end of one of my videos there about how he used to every weekend, on Saturday he'd be saying, "I'm going to get laid tonight. I'm going to get a girl. I'm going to get laid," and then he'd end up puking in a parking lot somewhere behind somebody's car or whatever. And I used to tease him about that. He'd be going on, "I'm going to get laid tonight," and I'd be saying, "You're going to puke. That's what you're going to do. You're going to puke just like you do every Saturday night." That's what would happen too. But anyway, he was smart though. He was really smart. And he wasn't academically smart, but he had street smarts. He was an exceptionally clever person. Just an awful good guy. And I remember in school, the teachers kind of picked on him because he wasn't really an academic. And they give him a hard time. But our vice principal had a talk with his mother. And our vice principal, when I was in high school, very insightful man. He was a man who was very practical, very down to earth, and he saw the writing on the wall. And in fact, him and the principal of the school, when I was locked up in 1983, they were the two that tried to get me out of there when I was locked up in the reformatory, because they knew I didn't belong there. And they even came up to see me to try to get me out, but they just weren't able to help me because I couldn't tell them what was going on. There was a guard standing there, and I had been warned not to speak of what went on in that institution. So they couldn't help me, but they tried. Anyway, this fella, he was a man by the name of Bill Doyle, Mr. Bill Doyle. And Bill Doyle had a conversation with my friend Robbie there with his mother. And his mother told me about this. Bill Doyle, he said to Robbie's mother, he said, "Don't you worry about him." He said, "He's not an academic, that's true, and he never will be. He doesn't have that kind of intelligence. But he said he is extremely intelligent. In fact, he's smarter than most. And he will go places, and he'll do things. And he'll do all right. So don't you worry about him. He's going to be good. He's going to be fine." And he said, "There's a lot of people I know who are academics, and they're completely useless. But he's not like that." He said, "He's got practicality, he's got street smarts, he'll do well." And Mr. Doyle was right, because my friend Robbie did go on to do very well for himself. He's a salesman. He's got the gift of gab even better than I do, only he knows what to say and when to say it. Unfortunately, I don't always know that, and I get myself into trouble. And he's got street smarts, and he's got practical intelligence. And I'll tell you, he could just run rings around just about anybody in a debate or anything else. And anyway, very intelligent man, done very well for himself, and I'm proud of him for doing that. And he deserves it too, because he didn't always have an easy time of it, and he earned everything he has. And good for him too. And the thing is, though, it goes to show anyway, though, how we sometimes get thinking that maybe we think we know about a thing, but we don't. Like the teachers thought that he was stupid because he wasn't academic. But that one teacher saw through that and knew he's not stupid, he's just smart in a different way. And Mr. Doyle was right about that anyway, and much respect to Mr. Doyle for seeing that too. I remember one time my friend Robbie, and this was in the mid-'80s when we could buy cars for next to nothing, and he got into buying and selling cars. And he sold so many cars that year that he actually got a letter from the Ministry of Transportation saying, "If you sell one more car this year without a dealer's license, we're going to prosecute you." I remember that. He got a letter warning him not to sell any more cars, or they were going to consider him an unlicensed dealer and they were going to file charges against him. And he made money, you know. Back then, we'd buy up cars for next to nothing, and we'd drive them into the ground, or we'd sell them, or we didn't care, you know. But he made money at it. I never made money at it. I just always had something to drive. But I never made money at it. I was never smart that way. But I remember one time, just to tell you how cheap cars were back then, I once had the opportunity to buy a 1964 Rambler station wagon for $75, you know. And it was in running condition, but I didn't want any part of a Rambler, for one thing, and I really didn't want any part of a station wagon. Plus, it was good mechanically, but it was rusty. It was really rusty. And what they had done is they'd taken that aluminum tape, and they had put aluminum tape over all the rust holes. So the whole body was covered in these squares of aluminum tape where they covered up the rust. Funny thing is, in those days, that would have passed the safety check. It wouldn't now, but back then it would. The standards were pretty low, and you could get just about anything on the road fairly easily, you know. Plus, there were always mechanics that would do you a rubber stamp safety. If the thing was really bad and couldn't go on the road legally, you could still get it on the road. But that wasn't ethical, but it was something that would happen in those days. Anyway, looking back on today, some of the crazy things. But anyway, this fella that I knew anyway, very smart guy. Very smart guy. And like I say, I remember that one year. It seemed like every 2 weeks he was driving a different car, you know, and you'd just buy them cheap and sell them and make a profit on them, you know. And I remember that anyway. Yeah, he was showing an aptitude for sales even back then, you know. Anyway, that's the story. I hope you're enjoying these stories I tell. I kind of ramble on about silly things sometimes, but, you know, like I say, it's kind of a record, too. I'm kind of keeping a record of my life and things that I remember and stuff. You know, for the younger people in my family who aren't going to always be here. Or when I'm not here, I should say. They'll be here longer than I will be. But, you know, basically when I'm no longer here, this will be a record. You know, of things that I experienced and of that era that I remember. And I guess it kind of makes me feel like I count a little bit, you know. So that's why I do it anyway. But still, I hope you enjoy it. It's interesting to remember these things. There's my buddy Rocky. Hey, how you doing, Rocky? You lovely boy. Anyway, that's it for now. We'll talk to you later.